There is no shortage of odious people who gain power thanks to Donald Trump. But if you had to pick just one who should be pushed out of public life, who should hang his head in shame and never be heard from or taken seriously ever again, it would have to be Stephen Miller, the guy who was more responsible than anyone for stealing children at the border, taking them from their parents' arms, the guy who targeted both legal and quote-unquote illegal immigrants for 4 years, demonizing them, mistreating them, making a mockery of the very idea of America as a nation of immigrants, a melting pot. A man who leaked emails show pushed a story from a white nationalist website and recommended a racist novel popular among white nationalists and neo-Nazis. Stephen Miller is probably the most repugnant individual to serve in the Trump White House, which itself is an achievement given the competition he faced for that title. And yet, we are now seeing the normalization of Stephen Miller, and not just on Fox News, where he gleefully concerned trolls the new administration about the situation at the border. Politico just wrote up a new legal group he's launching to harass Biden and quoted Miller in its influential Playbook newsletter like a pundit whose sage thoughts on immigration we should all take very, very seriously. The Hill newspaper wrote a story about Miller weighing in on the royal controversy, as if anyone should care what Stephen Miller, spreader of white nationalist propaganda, thinks of Meghan Markle or of racism. Look, the media have a tendency to treat anyone who has held a prominent government position as worthy of respect after they leave office. But that's not right. Stephen Miller does not deserve to be normalized. Some would say he deserves to be prosecuted. At the very minimum, he deserves to be shunned. I'm joined now by investigative journalist Jean Guerrero, author of Hate Monger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the white nationalist agenda. Jean, thanks so much for coming on the show. Explain to us why, in your view, Stephen Miller stands out among all of the many awful people that Donald Trump hired to work in his White House.
Well, he was not only responsible for Trump's most sadistic policies, systematically separating children from their parents, gutting the asylum system, dismantling refugee admissions, strangling green card access, essentially targeting families, not criminals and cartels, but children and their parents. And I really see him case study in radicalization. This is a story of an extremist who ended up steering national policy and national debate around immigration. As I show in my book, he was indoctrinated at a very young age during a difficult time in his life by a man who believes that everything we hold dear in American society is a result of white men. Stephen Miller was radicalized in the way that so many other Americans are currently being radicalized by the way that he shaped Trump's speeches and the way that he shaped national debate around this issue. And he wields enormous influence now over the Republican Party.
He does, sadly. And just on that point you were making, your book's subtitle refers to the, quote, white nationalist agenda. And we in the media, I feel, don't cover that enough, do we? How Republicans like Miller have mainstreamed far-right, what were far-right racist talking points, especially on immigration and the situation at the border.
Exactly. Not only do we not cover it enough, we also normalize him, and we normalize white supremacist ideas. We are helping people like Stephen Miller launder incredibly dangerous conspiracy theories about white genocide that have motivated acts of extreme white terrorism, like we saw in El Paso, where 23 people were killed by a person who was citing a quote-unquote Hispanic invasion. People are, the New York Times profiles Stephen Miller using words like firebrand instead of white supremacist. And as I show in my book, he is a person who invited a well-known white nationalist to his university. He was friendly with a white nationalist named Richard Spencer, and he was inspired by white supremacist literature and thinkers, including a book that refers to immigrants as beasts, as monsters, as swarthy-skinned phantoms, and talks about the destruction of the white world by brown and black people. If you connect the dots between what he did for Trump and the ideas that he's promoting now in the Republican Party and right-wing media, it's very much about these white supremacist ideas that he was radicalized to believe at a young age.
And it's not just young age or ancient history. He was sharing this white nationalist propaganda while in government. 2 other colleagues in government, 2 underlings. And I'm just amazed that was never a bigger story. And now here he is. We expect to see him on Fox News. That doesn't shock me. But to see him in some of the more quote-unquote mainstream publications being treated as just another government official, former government official, is truly shocking and shows what a short memory some of us have. Jean, when you were writing your book, Hate Monger, about him, what was the most remarkable or shocking thing you discovered about Miller or his life or his journey?
I mean, one thing is just the fact that his policies were meant to be cruel and harmful to people of color. You know, based on strategy papers that I reviewed for the book and correspondence that I reviewed, these were policies and rhetoric that were meant to incite white hatred and meant to radicalize and create extremism in the American public. And the other thing that was remarkable to me, it's seemingly mundane, but it was incredibly revealing about his character. You know, Miller, for a very long time, was obsessed with Robert De Niro's mobster character in the movie Casino. And his longtime friend tells me that Stephen Miller would dress up as this mobster, for special occasions. He would speak like him. He would behave like him. He would pretend to be him. And that this obsession that Stephen Miller had with mobsters explains his attraction to Donald Trump, and just this idea that there is no law and order apart from might makes right. This sort of fetish for the white male anti-hero while demonizing and dehumanizing people and communities of color in a systematic way.
Indeed, and that line of thinking is so important to expose, as you have in your book, and it's so important for all of us to talk about, as we're doing right now, because what's so both fascinating and frustrating about watching Stephen Miller is that my understanding is before Donald Trump elevated him to kind of speechwriter, campaign aide, warm-up act during the 2016 campaign, and then brought him into government as the guy who wrote the American Carnage speech and other such addresses, he was a kind of a fringe gadfly figure working out of Jeff Sessions' office. Even other Republicans in the Senate and other Republican staffers didn't take him seriously. And now, thanks to that elevation by Donald Trump, thanks to that 4-year White House tenure, we're supposed to take him seriously. We're supposed to read Politico Playbook and see quotes from Stephen Miller as you would from any former administration and just shrug our shoulders.
Exactly. And I would go farther. I mean, Trump couldn't have done the harm that he did without Miller at his side. Miller was always pushing him in the most aggressive direction when it comes to rhetoric and when it comes to policies. Trump really only cared about his border wall. For him, it really was about stopping illegal immigration. But Stephen Miller convinced him that he had to go after immigration overall and that he had to crack down on children and their parents in a very cruel and systematic way. Because for him, it was not about national security, as I show in my book. For Stephen Miller, it's about fears of demographic replacement. It's about the quote-unquote browning of America, this terror of a quote-unquote third world takeover that was very popular in the California of Stephen Miller's youth, as I document in the book.
Yeah, and the irony is, of course, Jean, he's the descendant of refugees.
Exactly. He comes from people who fled Eastern Europe, Jewish refugees who came here fleeing nationalist agitators. His grandmother, as I write in the book, tried to record for him the lessons about the dangers of demonization and the value of people who come here to the United States with nothing but the clothes on their back and speaking no English. And these are lessons that Stephen Miller directly ignored and attacked over the course of his life and has continued to do so in a very concerted way and has taken over the Republican Party. I think that this is going to be a major issue. Stephen Miller's narratives around immigration are going to be central in the midterm elections.
Sadly, yes.
And they're just going to try to whip up hysteria about this, alleged third world, which is very false.
It's truly horrific. I mean, to just sum it up, it's truly horrific that he's still on the scene. But Jean Guerrero, thank you for writing that book and enlightening us about Stephen Miller. And thanks for being with me tonight.